we have a nice like walk-in closet that we share,
Yeah.
and it's always really tidy now. All thanks
Yeah.
to Marie Kondo.
Thank you, Marie Kondo. Welcome back. This is the 11th month of my year-long foundations project. This month, the focus was on organization, or getting a tidier space and more efficient use of your stuff. So I am joined with my lovely wife here, Zaritza, and we're going to be having a conversation about the books I read, as well as the deep dive into deep cleaning that we did throughout the month.
Okay, Scott, you called this your weakest foundation.
Yeah, yeah.
Tell everybody, how bad were things really?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to exaggerate too much. I think, especially after reading the book about hoarding, you definitely get this kind of like, okay, it's not so bad. But I definitely feel like organization, keeping things clean and tidy was a weakness of mine going into this.
Mhm.
Like when I was arranging the 12 months, I was a little bit like, ooh, that one's gonna be a fun one when it came up. And then also part of it is just, we have two small children at home, which are like little Tasmanian devils, getting toys, throwing things around, making messes. And so, I think I'm not entirely alone here when you're a parent of small kids, that you feel like you spend half your life like running after them and like picking up things. And sometimes you say to yourself, okay, I give up. It's just going to be a bit messy. But I think in some ways that like difficulty you face sometimes leads you to be a little bit fatalistic. So I was noticing that, yes, it was the case that, with all the kids' toys and they're, generally being a little bit young to be super good about cleaning up after themselves. It was messier around the house. But then I noticed, but my personal spaces were often getting messy. Like it was the case that my office, where the kids never go to, was pretty messy and had a lot of like empty boxes for things that we had bought, and was disorganized, and that like my clothing space was a little bit disorganized, and the medicine drawer just had like tons of stuff that was just scattered from
And expired,
expired from different
mostly.
trips.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where I think you can have some sort of external circumstances that make it harder for you to attain whatever you feel to be your ideal. But then because it's harder for you to attain your ideal, you just become like kind of fatalistic about it. You're like, well, I guess I'm just going to be messy. So that was sort of my starting point for this month, that
Mhm.
recognizing, I need to be better about this, or my life would be better if I were better about this.
Right.
And so it was one that I was very, glad to work on, because I think it was important, but also with that trepidation that comes with like, ooh, I have more to a larger gap to close between the ideal than maybe some of the other foundations I started with.
Yeah. And for this foundation, I feel like I had to have a role in
Oh
it,
yeah.
because when you were doing the other project, it very much just involved you. And
Well, no,
so,
every foundation has involved you. That's been one of the big takeaways I've had for this project, is that like even the fitness one
Mhm.
has had so much coordination for like, okay, well, who's going to watch the kids, and making time and making our schedules work. So I know this is like, been kind of my project
Right.
from the get-go, but like I can't do this without you and without involving
No.
you. Yeah. And so, but this one definitely was
Yeah.
like,
It was like physical objects
it
that we
was
had to
stuff we share,
display.
like kitchen
Exactly.
stuff, and we have to come together on it. Yeah.
Yeah. When it comes to the kids, I find that's a little bit of a separate issue too,
Mhm.
because they're different than us. Like they're different
Yeah.
than grown-ups, because when we buy new things, we use them for a longer period of time. We kind of learn to take care of them, and we learn how to go through the things that we're not using and either donate them or throw them in the
Yeah.
garbage. The kids, like they're both growing really fast, and I
Yeah.
find, and that was usually me before doing it. Well, I think I still
Yeah.
mostly take care of the kids' toys and their
Yeah.
books and their clothes, because like our little one is 2 years old. She outgrows her clothes like every 6 months,
Yeah.
and so we kind of have to rotate through it and either donate them,
Mhm.
or throw them out. So that's a constant something to
Yeah.
work on. And even their toys too, like they get a lot of toys as gifts. We buy them a lot of toys. They're very lucky kids, but sometimes it can become overwhelming with how much stuff they have.
Oh yeah, Christmas and birthdays, and
It's
even you take your kid to a birthday party, and they come home with a little goodie bag of like little tiny toys and stuff. So I feel like
random little cards
Yeah.
just floating around that don't really have a home.
Well, it's been a
Right?
big change. I think, a little bit off topic, but a big change since I was a kid, that the price of kids' toys has gone down so much that, like, when I was a kid, it was like a much bigger deal when you would get a toy. But now, especially people who are close family members sometimes feel compelled to get like 2 or 3 toys because they were so cheap that like $10 wasn't enough. So they get like 3 or 4 things. And so they quickly end up with a lot of stuff. So, I mean, that's just one part of it. But I
Yes.
think the organization, yeah, it was definitely, I think, starting from a lower level than some of the other foundations
Yeah.
that I'd begun
But
with.
let's kind of focus on the stuff that we are responsible, like the
Yes.
grown-up stuff,
Yeah, grown up stuff.
At some point, yes, our little office area that we love, and it's
Yeah.
our space where we can go and do creative things. It was definitely becoming the garbage room where
Of the house. Yeah.
everything of the house,
Yeah.
yeah, where everything was just kind of being tossed in there, anything that we didn't
Yeah.
really want to deal with in the moment. Why do you think that was so hard for us to manage?
Yeah. So I think my takeaway from this month in terms of like what was the advice that changed my mindset the most, the first idea that had the biggest impact on me was that the problem of tidiness is more having too many things than having good storage. So I think what had happened over the last, let's say, 10 years of my life is that because, I was living alone and then we're together and then we have one child and then we have a second child. We had kind of been successively moving into bigger spaces. And as you move into a bigger space, you have more storage opportunities. So the pressure to like purge a lot of stuff was not as strong as it was when I was, living in half of a 1 bedroom apartment when I
Right.
was in my, early 20s. And so because there was not that strong space pressure, there's this idea of like, well, I'll just box it up and I'll be really organized with it and I'll put it somewhere. And the problem is that if you have too much stuff, this sort of uh, organizational tax of like keeping it in an organized state just gets higher and higher. And it eventually becomes too high for you to maintain. So things just naturally become disorganized. So that was the first lesson I had from this month was the key to tidiness is first eliminating a lot of the unnecessary things. And if you don't do that discarding step, it's very difficult, even with a perfectly designed storage system, to maintain that in a decluttered way. The second thing was that a lot of the ways that I was storing things were not actually the right way to go about storing it. So just as a, real simple example, we when we moved into our house, we have this sort of crawl space underneath that's maybe like it's only about like 3.5 feet. So it's very inconvenient to go down there. It's good for storing things, but it's like no one likes going down there to
We've
get stuff.
nicknamed it the black hole of the house.
Well, but it's like good for like, if you have, the camping gear and the Christmas decoration stuff, it's
Yeah.
great. It's great for that. But there was a period of time where we were using sort of the entrance into this crawl space to store some pantry goods. And what would happen is that you would like, put some cans and stuff, like not perishables, but like cans
Right.
and, the Costco size thing of olive oil and stuff that would go down there. And then what would happen is because it was sort of annoying going down there, you wouldn't check and you would end up buying duplicates of things. And so making the switch to be like, okay, actually the little office space we have next to it, we weren't using it as a pantry or using it as a bookshelf. We just sort of like, actually, this is where to store the pantry goods because we have to access it more frequently. That made a big difference. Or even things like, just how we were organizing some of the kitchen stuff as well. I think there was an area where like it was impossible to keep certain drawers organized because there was literally too much stuff in them.
Yeah.
And
My baking drawer
yeah.
was one example like
Yeah.
that. And I was getting so frustrated because every time I would open it, and I love baking and I use a
Yeah.
lot of those things. Like, okay, maybe I only use some of the cookie cutters for Christmas time, but I like them
Yeah.
and I want to keep them. And there's all these like little metal gadgets. And so it would all fall
Yeah.
everywhere and it would make a big mess and it was impossible to find anything in there. But then you kind of implemented this like box system where you put like all the baking things in one box, and there's like,
Yeah.
well, I'll let you talk about it.
Well, I mean, so this is like the main book that really helped me was Marie Kondo's The Life-Changing Magic
Right.
of Tidying Up. So I should really like like plug the books first of all, because if there's like one book you need to
Yeah.
read, this is
Look,
like the expert book.
I have it in the interview
Yeah,
packet,
yeah.
but we
So
can
we'll
talk
get to
about
it, but
book,
I mean,
all
this
the
was
books and
these are not my ideas. These are very much borrowed ideas. But
right.
the sort of like, again, her sort of advice, again, tidying starts with like discarding things, getting rid of stuff, which I think was huge because you don't even realize how much unnecessary stuff you have until you do like an inventory of it. So we would go through the kitchen things and realize like, okay, well, we do need to have, you know, a spatula, but maybe we have like, we bought a new spatula because the other one was getting old, but then we kept the old spatula. So there's just like an extra one in there. So there was a lot of stuff where, you know, even thinking conservatively, like sometimes you have guests, so you need extra plates or cutlery. There were just a lot of things that were extras, and that was true not just in kitchen stuff, but like across the board,
Yeah.
clothing, books. I did a big purge, and like even when I'm going through the books, I realized that there were some books that I bought twice because I didn't realize I already owned that book, or like I thought I had read it, but I didn't realize I had it in paperback or this kind of thing, and so the discarding is first. And then the second idea that I thought was really instrumental from her is just like the way you store it, organizing things so that like you have these subdivisions of boxes and things like that was helpful as well. Again, to just like keep entropy from just like from these things to just
Mhm.
burst out of their little bounding areas. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we have like the cutlery drawer as well.
Yeah.
Like there is three, you know how you have those three small drawers, and usually one of them is cutlery,
Yeah.
and that's fine. You can organize it, and there,
Yeah.
you know, you have your spoons and forks, and but then there is like another drawer where it's can openers and
Yeah.
all these other random things, and they were just always all over the
Yeah.
drawer. Whereas like now they all have little boxes that they
Little
belong to,
designated spaces. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's so helpful. The way I think about it too is that like, okay, if our house was an Airbnb and you constantly had new people
Yeah.
coming in, are they going to be able to find everything that they need?
Yeah.
Because if they can't, you probably can't either. Like you can, you know, you can be
Yeah.
working in that kitchen however long or however much you want to, but if you're not organized, then most of the time you're going to be frustrated, and that's not a way to live, right? Especially in your own home.
Well, that was another thing that I kind of another lesson from this month is that the idea of organization, even though it seems to be like a physical property of the space that you're in, like that what it means to be organized is to like physically have a place for everything. Um, the real idea of organization is cognitive. It's about reducing the mental effort
Yeah.
of knowing where things are, knowing where to put them back, being able to put them in. So it, you know, in some ways, things that are like really labor saving. I mean, the crawl space is a bit of an exception, but things that are really labor saving where, you know, it's requires less physical effort to move things
Right.
is not so much the factor. It's so much the factor of like, do I need to make decisions about where this goes?
Yeah.
Do I need to make decisions about like, where am I getting this from?
Yeah.
Because these little friction points, you know, again, we're like busy lives with
It
parents. At
stresses
the end of the day,
you,
you're
right?
tired. And if cleaning up is even like 20% more difficult, you just do it less often.
Yeah.
And things become chaotic very quickly.
Yeah. And so originally you were gonna kind of chip away at this project like one
Yeah.
thing at a time. And then Marie Kondo changed your mind on that.
Yeah.
Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, this entire year, one of my aims has been to find like a keystone habit for each month. So, keystone habit is basically like, what is one behavior that ideally you're performing with some frequency so you can actually make a habit out of it that would sustain a lot of the benefits of the foundation. So like for exercise, you know, exercising every day is a really good keystone habit because if you're exercising every day, you're getting most of the benefits of fitness. Similarly, you know, if you're doing expense tracking, even if you're only doing it monthly, it gives you a lot of the benefits of personal finance since it's like forcing you to touch base with your financial behaviors. For this month, originally I was thinking, well, it's going to be some kind of like do a little bit of cleaning every day kind of habit. Like that was, you know, going into it before I did any reading. And it was very interesting to see that Marie Kondo, the sort of the main book I was following, is like extremely against this approach. That she's like the sort of bit by bit tidying is why people fail at it, because what you need to do is actually in sort of one pass, and one pass actually may be extended over a period of time. We'll maybe talk about that later, but in sort of the briefest amount of time possible, you want to get kind of a total view of all your stuff in order to make sort of an intelligent decision about what you're keeping and what you're throwing away. And when you do these little bit by bit, like I'm going to clean up this drawer, or I'm going to like tidy this, it ends up being that you kind of push the mess or the clutter or the unnecessary things like from one space to another. And I noticed that I had done this in the past, that I would go through these little kind of mini decluttering sprints with, I'm going to clean up this drawer, I'm going to clean up this little space. And that you'd end up with all these sort of random bobs and bits and stuff that you just feel like, well, I shouldn't throw these out. They're not garbage, are they? Well, actually, they are garbage, but they're not garbage, right? And so you decide, I'll just put them in this other box and like put that out of sight. And then, I've cleaned this little space, so my task is accomplished. And so I think that kind of like revolving door of like trying to do it is part of the reason that getting organized and getting tidying, at least for me, was this Sisyphean task where you just feel like it doesn't matter how hard you work at it, you never make any improvements because you never get to do that full inventory. You never like actually go through all the books you own, all the clothes you own.
Face your reality of how much you have, right?
Well, you never have, I think, the right perspective for making decisions on what to keep. Like, I think it's only when you've actually like kind of seen all of your clothes is it possible to really make a gut level decision of what you need to keep and what you need to get rid of, because any individual item independently, it's kind of difficult to make that assessment, because like, do I need to keep this shirt is in some sense a question relative to all the other shirts you have. But when you've been like, oh, I've got like 15 of these shirts that I never wear, it feels much safer to say, yeah, this one can go in the donation pile, So I think it's the same thing with, like the kitchen spatulas. It's only when you actually see that you own 6 spatulas that you're like, do I really need 6 spatulas? When am I ever like frying up 6 things at once? You can be like, okay, 4 of these can go in the trash, kind of thing, right?
So you had this whole plan. Okay, I'm gonna take everything out.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go through everything. I'm gonna throw away or donate whatever I don't need. And you thought it might take you like maybe a few days.
Yeah.
What actually happened?
Oh, wow. Well, that was really optimistic. So, I mean, sometimes there's just wishful thinking involved. So I was going into this thinking, okay, well, you got to do it all at once. So, all right, I'll just spend a couple days, just, block it off, like good weekend, maybe squeeze an extra work day just to focus on this decluttering. It will be, I'll just power through it.
Yeah.
And I think my first hint that this wasn't going to be the case was when I'm again listening to Marie Kondo's book on audiobook, and she talks about how well, first of all, she's talking about how this needs to be done all at once. You don't want to have this like continual tidying habit. You need to go through this sort of like full process in one go. And I'm thinking one go means, like a week or a couple days. Yeah. And then later in the book, she says like, I think it takes on average someone about 6 months to go through this entire process. And I'm like, 6 months. I'm like, what am I going to do here? And so I didn't spend 6 months doing it, but after going through the process, I can really see that, oh, well, this is the reason I was procrastinating on it. This is like an enormous amount of work. And so I don't know how to like square that with like, maybe the idea or theme of this foundations project, which is like, a fairly lightweight habit, sustained over a month. But sometimes, you do what you got to do. Sometimes fixing your finances or your diet or this kind of stuff, they are more involved efforts. And so for me, like every single category was at least a day of going through. And that's not to mention that like when you end up with a lot of stuff, you're going to the recycling depot to like get rid of things, or you're, going to the donation bins, or you're having to do some of these extra kind of steps. And so, yeah, it definitely was like, it was pretty intense most of the month to get this done. Like, a lot of weekends, a lot of evenings to get it done.
Yeah. When people say it gets worse before it gets better, I feel like that's like an understatement. It got so bad. It got so bad. There was
we just had bags. Yeah.
There was like a and also all your books.
Oh, my books.
How was that?
I know, tragic. Yeah. Like thousands. Like I filled the entire our entire like sedan car was full of books. That's a good one to talk about, because for books, like she puts them pretty early in the sequence that you're supposed to do, because I guess in her view, it's one of the less tricky or sentimental kind of things. But for me, obviously, like books, I think have a special place in my life. And I would say that I kind of have flipped between different views on books multiple times in my life. So I remember in my early 20s when I was in my college era, I had very much a kind of like the value of the books is in the knowledge. Once I've read the book, who cares about keeping it? And it was very much accepting of the reality that I was like living in dorm rooms, I was moving around, I was like, sometimes traveling internationally, so I just all my stuff had to fit in a suitcase. And so I very much had a minimalist philosophy there. But then I think once I settled back down here and I wasn't moving around as much, I had this kind of like long-term fantasy of having some like grand library with like
The
all the books I've
like the
read.
bookcase, the big like floor to ceiling
Yeah.
bookcase.
And what would happen is I would like buy a bookshelf for my house. And because I would be, when I first started this, I was in this sort of purging books phase. I'd feel almost a little embarrassed about how empty the shelf was. It's like kind of like, oh, I gotta buy this in paperback. I gotta buy this in hardcover because like I gotta fill up the bookshelf. And I quickly realized that, well, even if the bookshelf looks sparse to begin with, it quickly fills up.
Yeah.
And then it's once it's full, it's not like books can shrink in space. So unless you go through and throw some of them in the garbage, you're having to like make decisions. So I remember we got this bookshelf as a backdrop for the office, and I also had books at home, but we got this one at the office a couple years ago. And there was a period of time where I even went through and I like alphabetized it. So like
Yeah.
it's true to this
I
day.
mean,
You're not going to notice this, but like this is A by author name, and then it goes like down to like Z and this kind of thing. And so it was I was very proud of this bookshelf organization. And and then what happened is that like I started this project, and this project involved a lot of reading, even though I'm doing a lot with Kindle and Audible and trying to avoid getting paper books. And then there just ended up being this just big stack at the bottom of like all the books that didn't fit that were from this project, and it just degenerated into a mess. So even though I got these books nicely alphabetized, it was the case that like there was one time there was a textbook that I needed for writing some of the lessons that I had read through, but it had like gotten misplaced somewhere. And so I was like having to like, use all sorts of like means to like figure out what was in the book and like source some of the studies that it was citing that I kind of remembered. And I was sort of chastising myself. I'm like, what's the point of having all these books if I'm like now Googling what's in this book because I can't remember where I put it. And so I think for me, the sort of turning point was recognizing that even if someday in the far future this like grand library idea gets realized, the amount of books I'll accumulate until then, means that it's probably better to just keep the books that I think are really meaningful to me, like
right.
books that I will maybe use this for research later, books that I, can't easily acquire again. And so there was a lot of books that I just, I'm like, you know what? You'll go off to a good home and threw it in the donation bin. But yeah, there's definitely an emotionality to decluttering that I think is underrated. Like this is, even though it seems like a kind of a trivial foundation, it's like maybe one of the more emotional ones because, our stuff, we imbue it with so many sentimental properties that like can be very difficult to be like, oh, but do I get rid of this? And so definitely for books, for me, that was one of them.
Yeah, I think the only objects that I have such an emotional attachment to is my jewelry.
Yeah.
And that's only because a lot of them were like
Gifts and
gifts and things that my mother used to own or my grandmother, and they were kind of passed down to me.
But luckily they're small.
They take up a lot of space.
Yeah, I think
I'm
family
okay.
heirlooms are okay to keep.
Yeah.
I'm not such a like, merciless discarder now,
Let's
minimalist.
throw
That like,
away all
all
the
right,
old.
grandma's wedding ring that she like brought from the old country, trash. Like I'm not saying that, I think.
No, I'm just giving an example of like
Yeah,
what my thing is,
right,
and
right.
that's it. And it's pretty easy to keep because it doesn't take up very much space. But
No, and I think that's true. Like part of it is not even so much about like being ruthless. It's more just about what is my keep discard kind of equilibrium point. That's the thing that I think is challenging because I feel like it's very easy to go into a tidying, cleaning kind of mode and just wanting to avoid that part of the question. Like I want to arrange things neatly and put them in boxes and put them in here and try to stack things so that they'll fit. And I don't want to deal with the harder problem of being like, okay, what's my threshold for keeping and throwing things out?
does it spark joy?
Yeah, does it spark joy?
joy?
The eminently answerable question of does it spark joy? Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so talking about books, Let's do like a little lightning round
Sure.
about all the 5 books that you
Okay.
read on organization. Let's start with the life-changing magic of tidying up.
Yeah.
The biggest takeaway from this book.
Oh, well, I've already talked about a lot of the big
Yeah,
takeaways. I mean, I
just
think
like a one sentence summary.
this is the best book to read if you're interested in like getting decluttering. It is an intense book, so it's not going to be like the, as I said, the 10-minute a day approach. And so there's other books that maybe are better if that's all you have the stomach for, but I think Marie Kondo has thought through everything, single detail on what it means to be organized. And so, like this is the one that I would refer back to as like, what's the right way to fold clothes or what's the right
Yeah.
way to store this kind of thing. That was a little bit my Bible for this month.
Our closet.
It's
It's so
better now. Yeah.
organized.
Yeah.
We have a nice like walk-in closet that we share,
Yeah.
and it's always really tidy now. All thanks
Yeah.
to Marie Kondo.
Thank you, Marie Kondo. All right.
What about stuff?
So this book was called Stuff: Compulsive Hoarding and the Meaning of Things, and this was a book by one of the leading researchers on hoarding disorder. And so it was in part kind of like all of these stories of his work with these clients who suffer from this. And so on the one hand is a portrait of people who in some cases these are people quite mentally ill. Like this is not just a everyone kind of like likes to make kind of light of some mental disorders, whether it be sort of like, oh, I have hashtag OCD because I like to put my pen caps on. And in some ways, this kind of belittles people who genuinely have like severe affliction. So if you have severe OCD, maybe you're not leaving the house, maybe you have to do, hour-long rituals, or you feel like you're going to die, you're going to have a panic attack. So just being someone who likes things to be neat, sort of disparaging. And so similarly, I'm complaining about my messiness and my clutter, but like there's stories of people he documents in this book where, they've lost their marriage, they've lost their job, they're going to lose custody of their children, their health is at risk, and like they can't stop, like they can't get through all their things. And so on the one hand, this is like this portrait of this kind of rather extreme condition that is actually surprisingly common. It's not an extremely rare disorder, and it's quite resistant to treatment. But on the same time, I think even if the manifestations are extreme, it illustrates a lot of the sort of psychological mechanisms that are universal. So just in the same way that OCD is typically thought of as an anxiety disorder, and so we all have elements of this kind of anxiety about things that cause us to do things, and it's just really extreme and pathological in those severe cases. Similarly, there's a lot of psychological mechanisms that underpin our relationship with our stuff that are probably universal. And so I thought the book was very interesting for kind of highlighting some of these things that, these kind of ways that we're not totally rational about our possessions. That's real lightning round answer, isn't it? All right, next one.
Three more.
All
Okay,
right.
how to keep house while drowning.
Yeah, so this is like the opposite end of the spectrum of Marie Kondo. So Marie Kondo is like, this is the ideal way to declutter, and it's going to be this enormous commitment, and it's going to like get you to the ideal. Casey Davis's book is sort of like, okay, you are so overwhelmed, you can't keep your house clean. What should you do? And so I found this like a very practical kind of balancing book, because she's using the example of when she first had her child, and she had a bit of postpartum depression, and she's just like, it's during the COVID lockdown, and she's like just really struggling, and like how do you maintain kind of like your basic life tasks in that environment. And so I thought there were lots of really good tips on there. She has this like 5 things cleaning up thing where basically you just go through and you decide, is it trash? Is it dishes? Is it laundry? Is it stuff that has a home, or is it stuff that doesn't have a home? And just kind of like, how do you break down the like chaos of tidying into chunks that are small enough that even if you feel overwhelmed, okay, all I'm going to do is just take the trash and just put it in one pile. And then if that's all I can do, I take a break. And, I just put the laundry in a pile. I don't do the laundry, I just put it in a pile. And so she has a lot of tips, I think, of this nature, and also gives a lot of details about how to think about tidiness. So it's not these questions of like, your self-worth as a person, but more like, how do I maintain a functional space for me? This is a gift that I give myself. And I thought it was very valuable for kind of resetting expectations there.
Yeah, that's really good because we are very hard on ourselves
Yeah.
sometimes. And I think, yeah, at the end of the day, are you happy? What can I do right
Yeah.
now? And sometimes this is good enough. It's fine, right?
Absolutely.
What about Happy by Design?
Yeah, so this one was a quick book that was talking about all the ways that architecture influences our mood. And so things like natural light, the spaces that we inhabit, these kinds of design considerations can have a big effect. One of the ideas that I thought was most interesting is this idea called biophilia, or basically that we have this predisposition towards nature. And so most of us maybe would be happier if we could include more things like plants, natural scenes, things like this in our kind of artificial environments. And it was a useful thought, because I think sometimes we don't even realize that we're feeling a little bit down or depressed because of the space we're in. We're not always sensitive to that. Yeah.
Did it talk at all about like colors and what colors can like affect
Yeah.
our mood?
I think there's a bit of research there talking a little bit about color theories as well. But I mean, again, I think this is a lot of the ideas were a little bit more architectural. So it was a little bit further of pace of like the organization month. But definitely if I was like going to get a house designed, I would focus on this book. And, even if I were like redecorating a major space, I think it would have been a useful guide.
Yeah. What about Wellness by Design?
So this is a similar book, very similar title too, but this one is more focused on health. And so there's sort of the behavioral stuff, like she talks about how, if your kitchen is uncomfortable to stand in, you're not going to want to prep meals there. So get like a fatigue mat for your feet, so that you're not standing on hard tiles.
Just moving around all the time.
Well, I mean, for a lot of people that they could get one that would fit. That was more our issue, that the carpet was moving around, or like slippers or something.
Right.
And she says things like, put your TV in a different room. Don't have it in your living room, because then you're going to have
We
more
do
sedentary
that.
behavior.
Yes.
So there were lots of kind of behavioral stuff, but then there was a lot of things that were more about the physical goods itself. So like getting furniture and carpet that's not going to off gas chemicals because it's, synthetic stuff, and getting like a radon detector depending on where you live, because radon's a radioactive gas and apparently can come out of, it tends to be coming from the ground. And so sometimes if you have higher levels, it's not going to be like carbon monoxide where it's going to, cause like an immediate injury, but it may elevate your risk of certain cancers. So you may want to have like this kind of detector. So it had a lot of useful advice in this kind of like, here's a checklist to think about making your home healthier. It even included things like anti-slip tape for stairs, which would have been nice if we had read that before you had broken your foot earlier in this project. So
well, we have them there now.
We have them there now. Sometimes you just have to learn things the hard way. Hey?
That's funny.
Yeah.
Is there anything that really surprised you out of all of these books?
Well, I kind of talked about sort of my personal revelation, but I think the biggest takeaway from the month was this idea that organization kind of has to begin with having a very clear picture of what you own and what that ideal is for you. And I think sometimes, again, this is kind of like, we live in such a state of abundance, and I can't speak for everyone, but certainly in my life, such abundance that it's hard to keep track of all the things you own. It's hard to even keep a mental inventory. Like if you think back to, our ancestors, where you might have had like, a dozen tools and possessions, and then that was everything. And now, I mean, the amount of stuff we have is just exorbitant. And so it's very difficult to even sometimes be aware of that you're keeping a lot of stuff that you don't need and can be gotten rid of. And so I think that coming to terms with what you own and making a conscious reflection about that decision, I think is the main takeaway from the month. Yeah.
Now let's talk about decluttering as a couple.
Yeah.
We definitely didn't agree on everything. I feel like there was what were some of our struggles?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, because we did the 2 months ago, we did the connection month, which was all about sort of like our personal, intimate relationships. And it was sort of like the organization month is the connection test. So you got to like get your relationship really strong in the connection month, so that when you do the declutter, that you don't like murder each other. But I think part of the difficulty is that we have small kids. So it's very difficult for us to both declutter at the same time, because usually it's like, well, except for those like hour when they go to bed and we're not awake, we're not going to bed, there's not a lot of time where we're both able to do it at the same time. But there's a lot of things where you do have to make joint decisions. And then there's also situations where even if we have our own personal stuff, we have we were having a big discussion about like, how do we allocate the storage space in the closet, and then when we were doing the kitchen stuff, I remember you have gone through sections of the kitchen stuff yourself independently, and then this time I did it more independently. But it's hard because if you recognize, well, I don't want to make a unilateral decision here to like throw this out and then get in trouble because this is something you really
Very
valued,
defensive about the kitchen. I was a little bit like, because
But you like it now though,
I
right?
do like it.
So
I
there we
do.
go.
Because
We decided to make
I had already
yeah.
put so much work into organizing the
Yeah.
kitchen.
You were very skeptical that anything needed to be done in the kitchen.
Yes. Yes, because
Yeah.
I had
But you
just
had
started.
done a lot.
Yes.
You
Yes.
had done a lot.
So
So
that meant that there wasn't very much work. A little bit of
yeah.
just small improvements that you made,
Yeah,
right?
there was just sort of certain patches of it that like
Yeah.
we hadn't really dealt with. So like you did a lot of the work on the kitchen, and then there were some other areas I did as well. And I think even with like the personal items, like with the books, we were sort of like I was going through my books, and because I have so many, I
Mhm.
had to be pretty ruthless about keeping them. And Zoe doesn't have quite as many books, and she was like, well, I don't want to throw this out. I don't want to throw this out. And so we were having like a little bit of kind of back and forth, a little bit of like,
Yeah.
teasing a little
Like,
bit about,
this book.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so I think, you know, I think any kind of foundation, this doesn't even just apply to this one, but where there is a lot of overlap in terms of your relationship of like negotiating and
Mm,
making it work. I don't know. I think just from my personal experience is that you have to listen and you have to very much approach these things
yeah.
not from a perspective of I'm right and I'm going to force my partner to do what's right, and be open to hearing about like how even if you think something is the right decision, maybe it has some side effects or some consequences that you're not
Mhm.
considering, and be willing to listen. And so yeah, the doing the organization as a couple, yeah, it's definitely
There was
like
a
an
lot of humor.
exercise.
I think there was a lot of humor,
An
a lot of
exercise in
teasing,
yeah.
and at least once a day, we'd be like, "I hate this so much."
Oh, well, there was also the accumulating garbage that we were like having to deal with, that we were like, I remember there was a few points where it's like, you got to take this. You can't wait till this project's done. You have to
Yeah.
take this to the like transfer station right now. Cause we're like, once you pull it all out and put it in a bag, you don't want to like stuff it into a corner somewhere. So yeah, there was definitely, yeah, the decluttering process was involved. Yeah.
Yeah. Any advice on other couples that are decluttering together?
Well, I think my advice would be more general than just, decluttering specifically, but like whenever you're embarking on a big change and it's going to impact the life of your significant other, to like talk to them about it. Tell them like, this is what I want to do. This is why I want to do it. Like, what are your thoughts? And then listen openly to it. I know this is just going way back to the beginning of the course, but I remember one person who was doing this foundations project in the course with us, and they were talking about their fitness month, and they were having a lot of tension with their spouse over exercising. Well, they had a new baby at the house, and this person's trying to exercise, and the spouse was like a little bit upset that they were not helping out as much with or that they needed to exercise, and it's obviously stressful at home. And I think, I don't think there's an answer to these questions specifically, but I do think the wrong way to approach it is to like begin with a kind of antagonism of like, well, this is so important to me and you're not letting me do it.
Yeah.
You really have to have buy-in, because if I had started this decluttering process with like, yep, we're minimalists now and I'm throwing everything out and you're standing in my way, like that attitude would have immediately caused conflict. So it very much had to be this idea of like, okay, I have some ideas of how I would like to change, and I realize that that impacts you. And
Mhm.
so I need to be sensitive to, what matters for you, and what you would like to do, and do this kind of thing. And that's sort of true across the board, not just about decluttering.
Yeah. You're very understanding too. I've never feel like you're on me about something. Like you're usually not really bothered by anything as well. Um, or maybe you are and you're just not
No,
saying
no. I
anything. I
mean,
don't know. One thing that I feel like I changed my mind about is I had this idea that everything that I use regularly should be in arm's reach at all time.
mm,
But the thing is, there's a lot of things that I use regularly,
Yeah.
especially in the bathroom. Like I have makeup that I use all the time, and all these different face creams or whatever.
Mhm.
And what I started doing, what I used to do is I would have a lot of things on the counter, and I hated it
Yeah.
because first it looks so cluttered, and it also makes things really hard to clean. And usually I'm the one that like wipes the counters in the bathroom and the
Yeah.
mirrors, and that's usually my responsibility in our house. And so what I started doing instead is I have everything put away.
Yeah.
So everything is either in drawers or under the sink, even like my face wash. And now whenever I need to use it, I just reach there and then I put it back. And then the only thing that's really on the counter is our toothbrushes,
Yeah.
right? And our toothpaste, and that's it. Like even that, I'm like, oh, if I could put this away somewhere, I would, but I don't want to go too far. But even for like the shower too, I found it was getting way
Yeah.
overcrowded. I would have like, I don't know, shampoo, conditioner, but then there would also be all these other things like, I don't know,
Yeah.
hair mask. Like the girls that are listening know what I'm talking about. And I have a shower caddy now. Like
Yeah.
I'm a college student. And I go in my shower with this little
Yeah.
basket because I like to bring all those things in there, but then I also want them to be put away as well.
Yeah.
So that's kind of one thing that has
Well, that
really
was
changed with
definitely
me.
a Marie Kondo takeaway too, that like trying to make it, trying to make it so that everything is just like exactly, within arm's reach often makes things much more
Oh yeah.
cluttered. And one of the big kind of principles that I adopted this month, which I had never really thought of before, but was that um, to the greatest extent possible, everything of the same type needs to be in the same place. So we used to have this practice of having like different medicines in different parts of the house, which sounds crazy now that I like say it out loud. But we would have like kids' medicine in the kids' bathroom drawer,
Right.
and then we'd have our medicine in our drawer. But then we'd also have like vitamins and also some other medicine
In the
in the
kitchen.
kitchen,
Right.
because sometimes we would want to access it there. And it seems convenient at the time because you're like, oh, well, I'm going to take this
That's
supplement or something
convenient.
when I'm having my food. So it makes more sense to keep it there. But the problem is that it's this idea that like the reason to organize is not physical burden, but cognitive burden. But when you have three possible locations that something could be located, I can't tell you how many times we would be like, we need the thermometer because one of the kids has got a fever, and like, where's the thermometer? And there's like 5 different places it
You're
could
running around
be,
the house
and you're running
like
around,
a
and
crazy person.
it's 2 in the morning,
Yes.
So
Yes.
that kind of reorganizing step of being like, hey, put everything in one place, and then you realize, oh, actually half this medicine's expired, and like, this kind of stuff. Okay, this is actually garbage. This is garbage.
Yeah.
It made a big difference, and so I do think some of these new principles have helped out a lot in keeping things tidier. We'll see. I mean, we're only a month out, and so I'm always aware that like these things require refreshers. So maybe a year or two from now, the entropy will have increased, and I'll have to do the declutter again. But at least for now, I've been impressed with how helpful it's been.
The next thing I was gonna ask is like fast forward to today.
Yeah.
Is your nightstand still clear?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is that I think there's always I don't believe sort of I would say the Marie Kondo, I've not gotten to that state of perfection where it's like, well, nothing is ever disorganized because, I think even like we even decided like we kind of stopped the decluttering process before we got to a lot of the kids stuff.
Yeah.
And so there are like some residual categories that, maybe at some point we need to go through those as well.
Yeah.
And so for my nightstand, it's a lot more organized, but then every once in a while there'll be like, some kid stuffed animal or this kind of thing that gets placed on it. So I do think there's going to be some ongoing work, even if there has been an improvement.
Still work in progress, you would say.
Always a work in progress. Yeah.
Okay. So any final thoughts? If someone was listening and is completely overwhelmed and drowning in stuff, what's one small thing that they can do today?
Well, I don't know whether it's a small thing, but I would definitely read Marie Kondo's book and then do a big thing, which is the decluttering. No, but I think the idea is that, focusing on getting a complete kind of grasp of all the stuff that you own is a big chore, but it is ultimately, I think, what is necessary to have sustained improvement here.
Yeah. And I feel like we talked a lot about organization.
Mhm.
Let's talk a little bit about next month now. What's the next foundation
Yeah,
going to be?
so we're this is like going to be the last
I
foundation for
can't
the
wait.
course. Yeah, we're gonna have to have like some kind of year-end wrap-up conversation. It's gonna be it's gonna we've been having these conversations every month.
Mhm.
The
I
so
feel
the
like we're
last
finally getting good at it.
yeah.
Sort of.
Yeah. So the last month is service, and so this
Yeah.
is the maybe an unusual foundation in that like the first 11 are very focused on improving our own life, whereas service is about helping other people. And so this month is going to be focused on things like volunteering, charitable activities, concern, and thinking about other people. And really, I think how all of that ties together towards having a meaningful life. So even though it is an outwardly directed um, foundation, in that it's not just about making my life better, it is an essential foundation in the sense that when you are entirely self-absorbed, in some ways that makes your life worse. It makes it feel kind of like, well, what's the point of doing all these kinds of things? Whereas if you have a strong sense of mission, if you feel like your life is important and helps people and is meaningful, I mean, that is really what holds everything else together. It's the real keystone that brings everything else together through its presence. And so, in some ways, it's maybe the most important foundation. And I'm gonna look forward to talking to you about that, about the books that I'm reading, and what we're doing for that next month. Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to it too.
All right.
Thank you so much for sitting with me. And thank you for everyone listening.
Yes.
We hope that this helps you to clear a little bit more space in your home and in your mind.